Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Weary traveler here on the journey inward, journey of the soul. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, third day into the fast, watermelon fast. In that sense, feeling very good. Oh boy, Hare Krishna. Wow, what a break. Boy. Hare Krishna. And keeping as much solitude as possible so that I can access the workings of my mind without a lot of external interactions. Hare Krishna, Krishna. So combined fasting and going inward is really, it's a journey. It's like taking a trip, you know. Hare Krishna. So these videos are really me journaling instead of writing down in a little book. My handwriting is terrible because I wouldn't even be able to read it the next day. My handwriting is so bad. It's like my thoughts race it faster than my hand can keep up with, and it just looks like a scribble. So just doing these videos. Hare Krishna, it's a video journal. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna. I may release them, post them, either YouTube or at some point, but they're not for like having a class and no, because that's not what I'm doing. I'm going inward journey. Hare Krishna, Krishna. So the challenge last night, and it was really intense, is, do I even believe that there is Krishna? Now, I'm practicing Krishna consciousness for over 50 years under the guidance of my spiritual master. And I get this challenge of faith. How do I actually know there is Krishna? How do I personally know? How do I know? And then, to top it all off, I was remembering hearing that Prabhupada said, you know, even if there isn't any Krishna, isn't this a nice way to live? Even if there isn't any Krishna. It's kind of a joke, in a joking way, and he started to laugh. So that didn't help any, remembering that. Yeah, the way I'm living is, it's not like very attractive to most people. It's very austere, a lot of fasting, penance, no social interaction, forget it. And doing this journey of the soul, going inward, and testing everything that I'm hearing, testing everything, because that also is coming in from outside. Like, how do I know anything about Krishna? I'm hearing from a spiritual teacher. He's telling me about Krishna. So blind following is not something I want to do. And my teacher condemns it. He says, don't do blind following. So I'm challenging everything I'm hearing. And I'm like, how do I know Krishna actually exists? How do I know? Have I seen Krishna? Well, yeah, Krishna's in the temple. He's a deity there. You can go and see Krishna. Okay, great. How do I know that that's actually an incarnation of God? How do I personally know? What is my personal realization? Challenging everything. Say, well, the pure devotee spiritual master, he's a representative of Krishna. So when you see him, you can see Krishna. Okay. But how do I actually know? I'm hearing that. Where's my realization? Well, there's prasadam, you can taste Krishna. Well, how do I know it's food and it tastes good? Although I'm fasting and I really don't take those kinds of foods even when I'm not fasting. Just my body just doesn't do well with them. I do a much more austere diet. Much more austere. Krishna, which goes well with the bodily functions. So I was challenged with this challenge of faith. It was intense. Last night, I'm trying to go to sleep and I get this challenge of faith. So sometimes I can't sleep when one of these things come because the mind is racing to find a solution. But sometimes I go to sleep with one of these unresolved issues, and when I wake up in the morning, I've got the solution. I'll sleep on it. So this morning, I'm getting how I personally can accept the personality of Godhead actually exists and is Krishna. Not because there was a lightning bolt in the sky, or I got some chills. Not because of that. That's not how I'm. It's because the teachings are perfect. At least I can't defeat them. I'm looking for loopholes that will allow me not to have faith in the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, not to have faith in the Bhagavatam as being presented by my spiritual master. I'm looking for loopholes, for reasons. Now, if I hear from some of the disciples, I can find lots of reasons to accept their presentations and their views on the scriptures. I can find lots of reasons to reject their presentations because they're students, they're trying, and they present a lot of other stuff. They have agendas. So I can reject easily most of them. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them. And I don't want to hear from them because they're not presenting purely. Most of them. But that's all right. Keep going, keep practicing, keep presenting. And because the teachings themselves are perfect. I can't find any loophole that would allow me not to have faith in Bhagavad Gita as it is. And the more I go into it, the more I read it, the more I realize there really is a source of this perfect philosophy, this perfect teaching that you don't find anywhere else. You find perfect teachings in the teachings of Jesus, these different faith-based philosophies, faith-based teachings. It's hard to find a loophole to get away from it, faith-based. The Quran, faith-based. But there's also a lot of blind following and a lot of fanfare and a lot of warm fuzzies and a lot of woo woo woo, which, okay, fine. But for me, that doesn't work. What's working is seeing that these teachings are perfect. There's no way to defeat them. It's perfect knowledge, which means they're coming from a perfect source, which means a perfect person. That's how I can understand that there really is Krishna. And if I accept that, I mean, that's big. Not just, it's fun, to be part of, and there's festivals, and there's good food, and there's lots of dancing and music, and if you want a husband, you can find one there, a fairly decent person who's very pious and also kind of enjoys the Krishna conscious community life, and you can have beautiful children, and that's all right. That's a path, and that works. There's provision for that. But that's not my path. My path is more this philosophical, which is kind of a challenge, considering being in a woman's body and constantly hearing how women are less intelligent. And so, what can you do? Don't listen. Don't listen to that. Those are discouraging voices. Don't listen to it. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Because there are, in this teachings, in this philosophy, there's two aspects. There's Shruti and Smriti. I forget which is which, but one of them, either Shruti or Smriti, is the truth as it's being presented in all places and times and circumstances, and in all cases. It's not affected by time, place, or circumstance. And then the other one, I don't know if it's Shruti or Smriti, one of them, is when a spiritual teacher is adapting the teachings to engage according to time, place, and circumstance. He's not changing the conclusion, but he's adapting slightly, like Prabhupada. He came to the Western worlds, and he couldn't just give the traditional cultural standards in the West. No one could follow it. So he adapted it slightly. Instead of 64 rounds, 16. He tried 32, wasn't going to work. Okay, minimum 16 rounds to qualify for initiation. I'll initiate you if you can. Take a vow for 16 rounds on beads, the holy names. And follow 4 regular principles. No meat eating, fish or eggs, just vegetarian foods. No illicit sex, that's sexual activity outside of marriage, and ideally, specifically, for producing nice children. It's not that married life is a license for whoopee. It's it's an ashram where sex life is controlled in that way. Man and a woman live together peacefully, and they engage in some sexual activity appropriately for producing nice children to be raised in Krishna consciousness. No gambling, which also means not just going to the races or the stock market, but it means also, they call that investing, but also with philosophy. In other words, accepting this philosophy as pure and surrendering to the teachings and following teachings, instructions. And no intoxication. Coffee, tea, even. So it's pretty high standards. That's pretty high standards. But that was how Prabhupada brought over the traditional, adapted it like that. 16 rounds, 4 regular principles. And in organizing and setting up his international organization for spreading Krishna consciousness, revolving around the temples and the deity worship and the culture that would develop from that, he said after the third generation they will actually be approaching the deity properly. It's going to take at least 3 generations of devotees coming from this preaching effort to approach the deity properly, nicely. An adaptation is he adapted the deity worship. He made it streamlined and very simple. He adapted following Ekadasi, streamlined it, and he expanded the ashram to include female students. No one ever heard of a brahmacharini before. So you had brahmacharis and you had brahmacharinis. No one ever heard of that before. And he traveled in modern conveyances like jet airplanes. As a sannyasi, supposed to travel on foot, village to village. What's this in an airplane? Driving around in cars, using dictaphones. What is all of this? So he adapted according to the service, what he was empowered to do by the disciplic line. He adapted. So there's that kind of adaptation that can take place. But there are principles that do not change. And they can't be defeated. I think Bhagavatam begins with that Bhagavatam is going to be presenting in 12 cantos. Srila Vyasadeva is going to be presenting in 12 cantos that which cannot change. Up to that point, he had compiled the Vedas, and there were prescriptions for activities in the modes of material nature, different types of ritualistic performances that can be performed, religious functions that could elevate human society and regulate human society and give shelter to all living entities with the varnas and the ashrams. It was all there in when he compiled the Vedas. What are there? 4 basic Vedas? Atharva, Yajur, Rig, and Samaveda. They all deal with different aspects of being able to elevate human society. But the Bhagavatam deals specifically with what cannot be influenced by time, place, and circumstance. And in that sense, it cannot be defeated. We can learn from anything, but it always comes to the perfect teachings, the perfect, coming from the perfect person through his perfect representatives. And that can't be defeated. So that was challenge of faith last night. But how do I know that there is Krishna? I can't actually see Krishna. I mean, yeah, the deity. Yeah, the pure devotee, okay. But what is it about them that allows me to access where they're coming from? And that's the pure teachings. Also, what their activities are, how they're acting. We can see the deity in the temple is simply for service to Krishna. His activity is to accept the offerings. And by accepting the offerings, they become sanctified, and then the devotee who's doing the service becomes purified by acting in a position of service to the absolute person standing there in the temple, Krishna, accepting everything. So that's a faith builder. Because Krishna says, the pure source, if one offers me with love and devotion, he's talking about different items, a fruit, a flower, some water, which anyone can do. There are flowers growing pretty much everywhere. At least now, before Kali Yuga comes. Water, a leaf, we offer with love, I'll accept. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. But by not being able to defeat these teachings, and whatever challenge has come to this, that Krishna actually exists, and Krishna really is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whatever challenge has come, there aren't any challenges that are new. They've all come before. These different challenging spirits, entities, living beings who have these challenging spirits. They've come before, either challenging the philosophy or challenging Krishna's existence. And they've all been defeated. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. So it's easier for most people to understand through stories. So there's all these different pastimes where Krishna is challenged and he defeats the challenger. And in doing so, he liberates them. They become liberated just by approaching Krishna. But on this philosophical level, this teachings level, that's what I need personally. I need a teaching, I need a philosophy, and I need a teacher who can't be defeated, where there's no flaw, there's no fault. That's what I need to actually not be just a blind follower. So by fasting and going into solitude and studying, hearing from Srila Prabhupada in his books, that's what I have to do now. And then I was thinking, well, maybe it's somewhere else. Maybe these teachings are good up to a point, but they don't go all the way. Or maybe it's not for me. Since mostly what I see is community building and social functions, and I'm just not part of that. So maybe this is all this movement is just social functions, and that's fine because it's around Krishna. So maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe it's not for me. So I'm looking, well, maybe there's another teacher who can teach purely, where I could actually find association to discuss these things. And in that way, my faith increased through philosophical study. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, in the association of like-minded inward journeyers. And I looked around, and so I was thinking, well, maybe within this line of disciplic succession, maybe I know a lot of Prabhupada's disciples have taken shelter of Narayana Maharaj. He's gone now, he disappeared, but his teachings and he has books, he's written commentaries, he has his perspective and devotional presentation of the pure teachings of Krishna. And he's more inclined toward his inclination is a little different from Prabhupada's. Maybe I should trundle on over there and hear from what's going on over there. So I was thinking like that. But no. Krishna. I think at this point it would just be another time-consuming distraction, and just to stay with this fasting and hearing, reading Prabhupada's books, hearing, because it's a pure source. This is a pure source, and I can't defeat the teachings. If I could defeat them, if I could find some, well, no, this is like, I read something in the Bhagavatam. I know some disciples early on left Prabhupada because when he was producing the 5th canto and there was discussion about the structure of the universe, and Prabhupada said, no, they didn't go to the moon. This was early on, before the conspiracy theorists have all concluded that they didn't go to the moon. It was just a political maneuver to one-upman the Soviets. It was a political movement to keep world dominance, not only military and economic, but scientific. And they made up that story of going to the moon. It was a political move. Anyway, there's a lot of controversy around that. And Prabhupada very clearly said they didn't go to the moon. I don't know where they went, but they didn't go to the moon. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. So at the time, everyone was accepting it. And just the technology they had was so archaic. I mean, it was practically still black and white television. I mean, my goodness. But anyway, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. A lot of disciples left. Prabhupada's, they didn't accept Prabhupada or his teachings anymore. They found that this was a flaw in the teachings and in the philosophy, that this was archaic. So they lost their faith because they found this flaw. So I'm reading, and sometimes I'm finding something that challenges my faith. Like, I was reading the other day when Balaram was touring India during the Battle of Kurukshetra. That he was visiting different temples, and one temple he visited, I think it was the one, Rangashetra. I think that was the one. Rama says it's the biggest temple in the world, and I think that's the one. It's also, no, there's a temple of, I'm sorry, I don't know, I don't think it's Rangashetra. It's another one. It's a temple of Goddess Durga. And Prabhupada said it's been there for millions of years. So I'm hearing that, and it's like, millions of years. That's a long time for a structure to remain standing. That temple, he very clearly says, it's been there for millions of years. And Lord Ramachandra also stopped at that temple. It's in southern India somewhere. So hearing that's like when the scientists are going to the moon. They didn't go to the moon. They didn't go to the moon. So I'm hearing it's been there for millions of years. And I'm like, well, the pyramids, how long have they been there? They haven't been there for millions of years. And they're very, very old. And they're deteriorating. I mean, millions of years is a long time for sun and wind and rain, for something that's made out of whatever it's made out of, stone or whatever. Even stone, millions of years, you know. So I hear a few little things like that here and there, and it challenges my faith. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Makes me wonder if, you know, maybe this is just a whole bunch of stories, just so, you know, and that the whole thing really is just about having a party. And then I think, well, that's what's going on in the spiritual world. It's one big party. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. So this fasting is, and solitude is interesting stuff. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, but I'm not giving up just yet. Because I can't actually defeat these teachings. Although there's a few little things that I hear that kind of, how does that work? But that doesn't mean, just because I don't understand how that works, that's not actually defeating the philosophy. It's just, you know, how does that work? So we'll see how a temple can be standing for millions of years. We'll see. There's different ways to understand that, and we'll see. Hare Krishna.